Welcome to TOCHI Stories. Please don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on post notification because it will mean the whole world to me. Now let's get right into the story. Brace yourself. Darlington Obi, the sole heir to the Obi Group Holdings, had never been one for surprises. Yet on that breezy Wednesday afternoon, he arrived at his estate without alerting anyone. Not his staff, not his fiancée, not even his mother, who usually micromanaged his every step. His flight from London had landed earlier than expected, and for the first time in years, he wanted to walk into his mansion without the burden of fanfare or formal greetings. The towering black gates slid open silently, and his convoy remained outside while he stepped in alone, holding just a leather bag and wearing a simple black polo with navy blue slacks. The stillness inside was unsettling. The chandelier above the entrance cast soft shadows on the white marble floor as he made his way toward the kitchen, drawn by the faint sound of music and laughter. It was not the kind of laughter that came from privilege or pretense. It was genuine, pure, melodic, and strangely contagious. And there she was, barefoot on the tiled floor, her wrapper tied loosely around her waist, headscarf swaying as she spun in slow circles with a mop in one hand and her other hand lifted toward the ceiling like a ballerina. She danced like someone who didn't know the world was watching, like someone whose joy wasn't dependent on money or fame. The Bluetooth speaker beside the pantry hummed with a soft tune by Asa, and every step she took fell in rhythm with the song. Darlington froze. Not because she was the most beautiful woman he had seen, though her smooth, dark skin and natural smile lit something within him, but because her freedom, her joy, and her authenticity struck him like lightning in a dry season. For a man who had seen the world, closed billionaire deals, and walked red carpets with women who wore diamonds like clothing, this moment felt like a window into a life he had forgotten existed. It wasn't just about attraction, it was about something deeper: peace, purity, and presence. He didn't say a word, just watched, until she twirled, startled to see him standing there. She gasped, fumbled with the mop, and almost slipped. "Olga, I'm sorry," she stammered, her voice trembling. "I didn't know you were back." Her eyes widened with fear, perhaps thinking she would be scolded or fired for using the speaker. But Darlington only smiled and shook his head gently. "Don't stop," he said softly, stepping further into the room. "I've never seen someone dance like that, so free." Her eyes dropped to the floor as she apologized again, reaching to turn off the music. But he stopped her hand. That moment marked a shift, a dangerous one. In that small space of silence between her heartbeat and his, something unspoken was born. And neither of them knew that everything in their world was about to change, because of a dance. Upstairs, in a bedroom laced with velvet curtains and French perfume, Cassandra Agu scrolled through her tablet while a maid painted her toenails a radiant shade of wine. She had no idea Darlington had returned, and even if she did, she wouldn't have rushed downstairs to welcome him. That wasn't her style. Love, to her, was about possession, a calculated alliance between her family's legacy and his. She was the daughter of Chief Agu, an oil tycoon whose influence ran through political veins like blood. The engagement between Cassandra and Darlington was a merger of powerhouses. Emotions had little to do with it. Their wedding had already been covered by multiple lifestyle blogs, and her designer gown had been flown in from Paris months ahead. But beneath the gold-plated mirror and designer jewelry was a woman who wore pride like perfume, subtle, yet choking. She believed men existed to orbit her universe, and that Darlington, regardless of his wealth, was just one of her many trophies. Whenever she was angry, she would shut down emotionally and starve Darlington of attention. When she wanted something, she demanded it without asking how he felt. To Cassandra, vulnerability was weakness, and humility was for the poor. She never truly listened to Darlington's heart or noticed when he sighed after long meetings or stayed silent during dinners. She didn't know that he craved something different, a woman who could understand silence, who wouldn't treat every emotional disagreement like a courtroom trial. Her love was conditional, performance-based, and heavily monetized. She often boasted to her friends that she would never be a maid to any man, as if kindness was servitude. Though Darlington tried to reason with her at times, he was always met with snide responses or condescending laughter. He felt suffocated, but obligations and family expectations kept him locked in. The thought of backing out now felt like detonating a bomb that would destroy his entire empire. Cassandra's mother, Lady Monica, was even worse. She saw the Obi family as a stepping stone to extend her already vast influence, and would constantly call Darlington's mother with suggestions for the wedding or warnings about unrefined staff mingling too freely. In private, Cassandra often mocked Darlington's soft spots, calling him weak for empathizing with staff or worrying about orphans. The love he received from Cassandra was showbiz, well-packaged, beautifully dressed, but empty on the inside. Compared to the light he saw in Amaka's eyes when she danced, the contrast was painful. For the first time in his life, Darlington began to question whether marrying Cassandra was worth it, whether pleasing his family was worth the emotional cost. And while he sat on the balcony that night, sipping wine in silence, he couldn't get the image of that barefoot dance out of his mind. The next morning, Darlington found himself sitting at the kitchen island again. He waited until he heard Amaka's footsteps and watched as she stepped into the room, wearing her usual modest maid uniform, her afro tied neatly in a bun. He waved her over, and she approached cautiously, unsure of why he looked at her the way he did, like she was more than just help. "Good morning, sir," she said, not meeting his eyes. "Sit," he said. Her eyes shot up in shock. "Sir," she whispered. "I said sit," he repeated gently, gesturing to the stool opposite him. Amaka hesitated before obeying, her hands neatly folded in her lap. Darlington watched her for a long time, his heart pounding louder than usual. "You danced yesterday," he finally said. "And you looked happy." Amaka nodded slowly, clearly uncomfortable. "It was just a song, sir. I didn't mean to." "I want to see you smile again," Darlington interrupted. "I haven't stopped thinking about it." Silence filled the kitchen like fog. Amaka blinked. Then Darlington leaned forward, lowering his voice. "I want to make you smile again. I want you to have reasons to dance, not just when you're alone." Amaka's lips trembled. "Sir, I don't know what you're saying, but please, I am not. I'll give you 10 million naira, he said abruptly. Her head jerked. "What?" she said, voice trembling. "I'll take care of your family. Buy you a house, car, anything you want," he said, staring at her like she was a puzzle he had to solve. "Just stay with me. Just one night." The air went cold. Amaka stood up slowly, her face pale with emotion. "Sir, I'm sorry, but I am not for sale." Her voice cracked, but her spine stayed straight. "I know you're engaged. I won't be a reason your home breaks." She walked out without waiting for a response, leaving Darlington stunned. No one had ever turned him down before, not like this. Especially not when money was involved. The rejection burned deeper than expected, not because he didn't get what he wanted, but because it made him realize how much he had become surrounded by people who bowed to his money instead of his heart. That night, as he lay in his bed with Cassandra curled up beside him, talking about matching Rolls-Royce colors for their wedding convoy, Darlington realized something chilling. He was sleeping beside the wrong woman and falling in love with the one who walked away. The days that followed the encounter in the kitchen were unsettling for Darlington. He thought Amaka's rejection was temporary, a performance of virtue that would crack under the weight of his persistence. But Amaka never wavered. She resumed work every morning with quiet grace, never lingering in the same room as Darlington for more than a few seconds. She avoided eye contact, greeted him with the same polite "Good morning, sir," and never once brought up the conversation that had unfolded between them. This only drove Darlington deeper into a state of obsession. He had expected her to change her mind after seeing the opportunities he could offer, but instead, Amaka moved like someone who was protecting something much bigger than money, her dignity. For Darlington, this defiance was both frustrating and intoxicating. In a world where his wealth could buy everything and everyone, she remained immune to his power. It was no longer about lust. He admired her resolve for strength, her refusal to bend in a system designed to break women like her. One afternoon, after returning from a meeting, Darlington cornered Amaka in the garden behind the estate. The air smelled of hibiscus, and the sun was beginning to dip. He stepped in front of her, stopping her movement with a pleading expression. "Just hear me out, please," he said softly. Amaka froze, gripping the tray she held. I know what I said that day was wrong. I made you feel like I was trying to buy you, and I apologize. His tone was sincere. For the first time, he wasn't the arrogant billionaire. He was a man stripped of pretense. I see something in you I haven't seen in anyone else, he continued. You're not like the others. You're strong, you're kind, and you make me feel real. Amaka looked at him then, her dark eyes clouded with emotion. Sir, please, don't say these things. You have a fiancée, a beautiful one. This, whatever this is, it can only end in shame. Her voice cracked, but her posture didn't falter. I don't want to be the woman that gets blamed. Even if my heart, she stopped herself and looked away. That moment hung in the air like unshed rain. Darlington stepped back, realizing just how deeply her integrity ran. She wasn't rejecting him because she didn't feel something. She was doing it because she valued herself and her principles more than his promises. That hit him harder than any slap could. As she walked away, his chest tightened, not in anger, but in admiration. He watched her disappear around the hedge, her tray balanced with poise, her head high. The realization dawned. He had never truly loved Cassandra. What he felt for Amaka wasn't born of seduction, it was respect. And respect, for a man who had lived in a sea of plastic affections, was the rarest form of love. But how could he pursue her when the weight of tradition, family expectations, and Cassandra's shadow loomed over his every move? From that evening on, Darlington began to create moments, not just encounters. He started waking up earlier to accidentally run into Amaka while she cleaned the patio. He would ask casual questions about her village, her favorite meals, her childhood memories. At first, Amaka answered with caution, but gradually, the stiffness began to melt. She laughed once at a joke he made about his cooking skills, and Darlington carried that laughter in his heart for days like it was gold. He noticed how she'd sometimes hum while folding clothes, and how her eyes sparkled when she talked about her younger brother who wanted to be a doctor. These small interactions became the highlights of his day, even though they were laced with guilt. He had a fiancée, a pending wedding, and a public image to uphold. But every moment with Amaka felt more real than the expensive engagement parties or magazine interviews he'd been forced into. Meanwhile, Cassandra became increasingly aware of Darlington's emotional detachment. She noticed how he no longer responded to her sarcastic remarks or flattery. He no longer showered her with spontaneous gifts, and the sparkle in his eyes when he looked at her was long gone. She tried to reclaim his attention with extravagant gestures, surprise dates, new lingerie, even threats to call off the wedding. But Darlington responded to all of it with polite indifference. You've changed, Cassandra hissed one night as she paced their bedroom in her silk robe. You're no longer excited about anything. Darlington looked at her from the bed, expression unreadable. Maybe I'm tired of pretending, he said. Cassandra's lips parted in disbelief. She had never seen him this blunt. That night, she began to suspect that there was someone else. And not someone from his elite circle. No, this was different. The distance in his eyes wasn't lust-driven. It was emotional. And that scared her more than any cheating scandal ever could. As Cassandra's suspicions grew, so did her strategy. She began to secretly watch the house staff, often calling the head maid into her room for unnecessary reports. She lingered near the kitchen to catch glimpses of Darlington and Amaka interacting. Her jealousy wasn't just about being replaced. It was about being replaced by someone she saw as beneath her. A maid? The audacity was infuriating. So she smiled her fakest smile and waited, planning the next move. Meanwhile, Darlington and Amaka shared a moment in the garden under the moonlight. Not a kiss, not a touch, but something more intimate. He told her, if things were different, I would choose you. And Amaka, eyes glistening, replied, if things were different, I would believe you. That night, they both knew they had stepped into dangerous waters. Their hearts were entangled, but their realities were barricaded by consequences neither of them could escape. Cassandra's plan took form quickly and quietly. She called her mother under the guise of a wedding update, but slipped in whispers of a loyal maid turned gold digger. Lady Monica, as ruthless as she was elegant, didn't need much to ignite her fury. Disgraceful, she muttered over the phone. I warned you not to let him mix too freely with the staff. These poor girls know how to act innocent until they trap a man. Cassandra smirked, satisfied. Don't worry, Mother. I'll handle it. I just wanted you to be aware. It's time we put boundaries in place. That week, Cassandra instructed the house supervisor to monitor Amaka closely and file daily reports. The once friendly staff environment turned icy. Amaka noticed the stares, the whispers, the cold shoulder from colleagues who once chatted freely. But she didn't flinch. She kept to her work like a soldier under fire, knowing any misstep would be used to crucify her. Meanwhile, Darlington felt the walls closing in. He could sense that something was changing, that the air had become tense around Amaka. He asked her during one of their brief hallway meetings, "Are they treating you badly because of me?" Amaka didn't lie. "Yes, but I'll be fine. This isn't the worst I've seen." Her voice was steady, but her eyes betrayed the pain. Darlington clenched his jaw. "I'm ending this engagement soon," he whispered. "I can't marry a woman who makes my heart feel nothing." Amaka shook her head slowly. "Don't do that because of me. If you leave her, let it be for your own peace, not for mine. I'm not looking for rescue, sir. I'm looking for peace." That word again, peace, echoed in Darlington's heart like a drum. How could a woman with so little speak, like someone who possessed everything? That night, he sat alone in his office, staring at his wedding invitation card and wondering why the woman he was set to marry didn't feel like home. And then it happened. Cassandra accidentally dropped a diamond bracelet into Amaka's laundry cart. A few hours later, she stormed into the servant quarters, dragging the head maid with her. "Where is it?" she shouted. "My bracelet. It was in my jewelry box this morning." Darlington was called downstairs in a frenzy. Amaka stood still, confused, her hands trembling. The bracelet was found stuffed between folded sheets in her laundry basket. The staff stared. Cassandra crossed her arms. There she is, the humble one, the loyal one, stealing from us while smiling at you. Darlington looked at Amaka, and then at the bracelet. His face went pale. He walked over, took the bracelet, and threw it to the floor. "Stop this nonsense," he said coldly. "No one is stealing from you, and I won't tolerate this madness in my house." Cassandra gasped. Amaka stood in stunned silence. And that's when everyone realized the battle lines had just been drawn. The aftermath of the bracelet incident left the household divided. Though Darlington had defended Amaka publicly, the weight of suspicion lingered in the air like a foul stench. The staff began whispering more fervently behind closed doors, afraid of being seen in her presence. Some envied the attention she received from the boss. Others feared Cassandra's growing wrath. Amaka walked with lowered eyes and clenched jaws, her dignity intact, but her peace shattered. She had always known that crossing paths with the powerful came with a price, but she hadn't imagined the cost would be this high. In private, Cassandra seethed. Her accusation had failed, but her mission had not. She had succeeded in painting Amaka as a threat, not just to her relationship, but to the family's reputation. She knew it was only a matter of time before Darlington would be forced to choose. And when that time came, she'd make sure it ruined him. Meanwhile, Darlington wrestled with guilt and confusion. He had crossed a dangerous threshold by defending Amaka, not because she didn't deserve protection, but because it exposed how deeply he felt for her. He started receiving subtle calls from Cassandra's father and even his own mother, questioning his choices and warning him about the optics of associating with a maid. "She's ruining you, Darlington," his mother warned during dinner. "This is a marriage of legacy, not playground romance." He barely touched his food. His heart was no longer aligned with legacy. His soul longed for honesty, for warmth, for the kind of smile Amaka gave when she spoke about her mother's bean cakes. Cassandra, on the other hand, noticed his increased absence, both physically and emotionally. He no longer spent nights in her room or entertained her rants. Instead, he took late-night walks alone or sat in the garden with music playing softly from his phone, staring at nothing and thinking of everything. Cassandra took her vengeance to the next level. She began tailing Amaka, following her to her quarters, sending house staff to report on her every move. She even called Amaka into her room under the guise of correcting a mistake in laundry, only to deliver veiled threats. "You think you've captured his heart with your silence and suffering?" she whispered, gripping Amaka's wrist. "Don't be stupid. Women like you don't marry men like him. You're a maid. Stay in your place, or I will destroy you and your entire bloodline." Amaka stared back with tears in her eyes, not because she was afraid, but because she could feel the weight of a battle she never wanted to fight. "I don't want him," she whispered. "You do. So keep him. I just want peace." But peace, she would soon learn, was a luxury the powerful never allowed the powerless to afford, especially when their pride was at stake. It happened on a Thursday evening, the kind of humid night where sweat clung to the skin like second clothing. The house was quieter than usual, the tension still heavy from Cassandra's previous outburst. Amaka, tired and emotionally drained, went about her usual chores, praying for the day to end quickly. She folded sheets in a laundry room, unaware that Cassandra was executing yet another trap. This time, it was a diamond necklace, far more expensive than the bracelet, and hidden neatly within the folds of a freshly washed blanket that Amaka was instructed to deliver. Cassandra had timed everything perfectly. A scheduled visit by her mother, the presence of Darlington's father in the mansion, and strategically placed staff members ready to act as witnesses. As Amaka carried the blanket into the guest room, she was cornered. "Stop right there," Cassandra yelled from the hallway. Guests gathered like moths to fire, and within moments, Lady Monica stood glaring at the scene. Amaka was ordered to unfold the blanket in front of everyone. Her hands trembled as the diamond necklace tumbled to the floor like a death sentence. Gasps filled the hallway. "I knew it," Cassandra screamed. "First my bracelet, now my necklace? You think because he smiled at you, you've earned a share of our inheritance." Amaka tried to speak, but her voice caught in her throat. The room spun. She looked around at the faces, blank, judgmental, vindictive. No one defended her this time. Not even Darlington, who had just walked in and was still processing the scene. "Is this true?" his father asked, his voice low but full of fire. "This is what you've been protecting." Darlington opened his mouth, but found no words. Amaka's heart shattered, not because of the humiliation, but because the man she thought saw her had now chosen silence when her voice needed his most. The pain cut deeper than any slap could. She walked away, slowly, dignified even in disgrace. She didn't run or beg. She returned to her quarters, removed her uniform, packed her small bag, and stared at the tiny photograph of her mother beside her bed. Tears streamed down her cheeks silently. She had done nothing wrong, nothing but feel something for a man who belonged to another. A man whose silence now screamed louder than the mob that shamed her. In the main house, Darlington paced alone in his study, haunted by her face, her trembling hands, her broken spirit. He knew it was a setup. Cassandra's eyes had told him everything. But his fear, his family, his wealth, they had all chained his courage. And now he had lost her, perhaps forever. Outside, rain began to fall, not heavy, just enough to make the world feel like it was crying with him. Amaka was gone, and so was his peace. The rain followed Amaka as she made her way back to the slums of Icatan, Lagos, a place so far from Darlington's estate, it felt like another universe. The streets were muddy, her shoes soaked, and her heart a shattered vessel of unspoken pain. She held her bag tightly against her chest as she weaved through narrow alleys and sidestepped vendors shouting prices. Home was a one-room zinc-roofed structure she shared with her mother and two younger siblings. Her mother, Mama Ngozi, coughed violently as she opened the door, surprised to see her daughter home so early and without notice. Amaka smiled weakly and lied. "They gave us break, Mama. I came to help you." Her mother believed her. She always did. But that night, as Amaka watched her mother sleep and her siblings curled beside a dim lantern, she cried silently, biting her knuckles to keep the sobs in. The pain wasn't just about love lost. It was about being reminded of her place in a world that would never let her rise. Back at the mansion, Darlington sat alone in his car, parked in front of Amaka's empty room. The space looked colder, smaller, lifeless. Her scent still lingered in the air, a mix of baby powder and shea butter. He picked up the small Bible she had left on the table, thumbing through the pages until he found a handwritten note tucked inside. To serve is not to be weak. To walk away is not to lose. If love must cost me my peace, then let peace be my only love. His throat tightened. How had he let this happen? He had tried to protect her, but not loudly enough. He had loved her, but not bravely enough. He had failed her, and now she was gone. His engagement to Cassandra was still intact, but it felt like a prison sentence. Everyone around him expected him to smile, to proceed with the wedding, to be the obedient son. But his heart had defected. It beat in another world now, one where peace wore a maid's uniform and smiled like sunrise. Days turned to weeks. Amaka began working as a cleaner at a small church near their neighborhood. It didn't pay much, but it paid enough to keep food on the table and her siblings in school. She never spoke of Darlington. She erased him in public, but mourned him in private. In her diary, she wrote letters to him she would never send. Letters where she told him how his silence hurt more than Cassandra's words. How she missed his laughter. How she forgave him, even though she couldn't return. One evening, while sweeping the chapel stairs, she saw a black car parked at a distance. Her breath caught. The glass was tinted, but she knew. She felt it. He had found her. But instead of approaching, she picked up her broom and walked inside, leaving him with only the view of her back and the ache of everything they could have been. The heavens opened without warning that evening as Darlington drove through the narrow streets of Iketon, Lagos. His mind raced faster than the wipers on his windshield, struggling to keep up with the downpour. Earlier that day, he had bribed one of the former housemaids who had always liked Amaka. For weeks, he had been desperate to know where she had gone after resigning in silence. And when the girl finally whispered, "Check near Christ Glory Chapel. I heard she works there now," he felt a strange mix of relief and shame. He couldn't tell anyone he was searching for her. Not his parents, not his friends, not even his conscience. His entire world, wealth, business, image, was tied to his engagement with Cassandra. Yet here he was, abandoning meetings and calls just to see a woman who had already walked away. His car stopped a few feet from the church gate, and through the misted windshield he saw her, Amaka, sweeping the chapel stairs, her movements calm, her figure wet with rain but graceful as ever. He didn't step out immediately. He watched her instead, as if trying to collect enough courage to speak. She looked thinner, perhaps more worn, but still carried herself with quiet dignity. She wore no makeup, no jewelry, just a plain dress and a scarf to shield her hair. Darlington felt his heart twist. This was not the world she belonged to, this world of mud, rain, and silent poverty. But it was also the world that had shaped her strength. He stepped out slowly, umbrella in hand, and called her name. She looked up, startled, the broom falling from her fingers as their eyes locked. "What are you doing here?" she asked, voice trembling not with fear, but with unresolved memories. "I came to take you home," he said. She shook her head instantly, stepping back. "You don't belong here, Darlington, and neither do I belong there. We come from two different fires. You'll burn me without meaning to." He tried to plead with her, telling her about how miserable life had become, how empty his mansion felt, how he was willing to throw everything away for her, the engagement, the wealth, the respect of his father. But Amaka didn't smile. She didn't even blink. "You're not here because you love me," she said, her voice soft but sharp. "You're here because I'm the only thing in your life that didn't submit to your money. You're here because I said no when everyone else said yes. But love isn't about rescue. It's about sacrifice. And you didn't sacrifice anything for me when it mattered." Darlington's eyes filled with tears. "Give me a chance now," he begged. "Please, just come with me. Anywhere you want." But Amaka simply picked up her broom, nodded politely, and walked into the chapel. The door closed behind her, leaving him alone in the rain, drowning in the silence she left behind. Back at the Obi estate, Cassandra was unraveling. Her family had invested too much into this engagement, and the cracks were beginning to show. Her father had caught wind of the rumors that Darlington was visiting the mainland frequently, that he was seen around churches and in slums. And he wasn't stupid. "There's another woman," he growled one evening, slamming his glass of brandy on the table. "And you let this happen under your nose?" Cassandra's eyes brimmed with tears of rage, not sadness. "She's a maid, father. A damn housegirl." Chief Aga's laugh was cold. "And yet she's doing what you couldn't, controlling him without touching him." Cassandra's pride was a ticking bomb. She began forging her own plan, something far more sinister than the framed bracelet or the planted necklace. This time, she would destroy Amaka where it would hurt the most, her family. She had her assistant gather every detail about Amaka's background, her sick mother's location, her siblings' school, even the church she now worked at. Then she used her contacts to plant a scandal, accusing Amaka of being caught with suspicious money transfers, all falsified through manipulated mobile records. Within days, rumors spread that Amaka had been laundering money for a rich man. Some said a politician, others said a cultist. The police showed up at the church during her evening sweeping. She was humiliated in front of parishioners, dragged outside like a criminal, even as she wept and begged to know her crime. Mama Ngozi collapsed upon hearing the news, and her siblings were dismissed from school for safety reasons. Darlington found out 2 hours later and rushed to the station, only to be told that it was above his influence. Cassandra had moved strategically. She'd made it legal, and Darlington's hands were now shackled by politics. When he confronted Cassandra, she didn't deny it. She poured wine, sipped it calmly, and said, "Now you know how it feels to lose something beneath your status. You were going to embarrass me for a maid? You thought there would be no consequences." Darlington's fury was nuclear. He threatened to cancel the wedding on the spot. Cassandra leaned in, voice cold as steel. "Then be ready to lose everything. Because your father's company is tied to ours in 5 contracts. The moment you break this engagement, 3 billion naira will vanish from your account in 1 day. Your family will fall, your company will bleed, and she will still not be yours. You think you're a king, Darlington, but you're just a man trapped in a castle you didn't build." He stormed out, breathless, helpless, and torn. He had built empires, yet he couldn't protect the one woman who never wanted his empire, only his loyalty. The small police station in Iketon reeked of sweat, rust, and cigarette smoke. Amaka sat in the corner of the holding cell, her hands between her knees, her head bowed low. It wasn't a cement floor or the iron bars that broke her spirit. It was the realization that no matter how pure her heart remained, the world would always find a way to corrupt her peace. A week had passed since the false allegation surfaced, and although the police had released her on bail after Darlington pulled every string he could, her life had already been torn apart. The church no longer wanted her presence. Her neighbors whispered whenever she passed. Her younger sister asked if they were now criminals. Her mother had fallen ill again, emotionally this time, and Amaka knew that staying in Lagos meant permanent ruin. So she packed her few clothes, left a note behind, and vanished. Darlington returned to her house in the slums one night with food, medicine, and a box of money. He knocked, called, pleaded, but there was no answer. The landlord emerged with a shrug. "She done pack Comet yesterday. No tell anybody where she go." Darlington felt a familiar panic, the kind that gripped his chest the first time she walked away from the mansion. Only now it was worse. This time, he didn't know if he'd ever see her again. She had become a ghost, invisible, unreachable, and heartbreaking. He sat on the steps of the empty house, the sound of generators buzzing in the background, and realized he had failed. Not as a man, not as a billionaire, but as someone who had been given a chance to love and protect something real, and lost it because he chose silence when he should have roared. The next day, Darlington canceled all his meetings, turned off his phone, and sat alone in his office, staring at their wedding invitation. It had gold trimmings, their names engraved in calligraphy, Darlington and Cassandra, bound by legacy. He laughed bitterly, then tore the card in half. He opened his drawer and pulled out the handwritten note Amaka once left behind. He read it again, line by line, memorizing each word like scripture. He knew then that he couldn't marry Cassandra, even if it meant losing everything, even if it meant war. He would rather chase a woman who didn't want his riches than live rich with a woman who wanted everything but his heart. He stood up, looked out the window, and whispered to the wind, "I'll find you, Maka. Even if I have to search the whole country, even if I have to burn everything I built to the ground." The atmosphere inside the Obi mansion had become unbearable, a suffocating blend of silence, tension, and passive-aggressive remarks from family members. The media had caught wind of Darlington's behavior. A few blogs hinted at a scandal involving a billionaire heir and a former domestic worker. While the stories remained vague, his mother was anything but subtle. She summoned him into the drawing room one evening with an expression that was colder than marble. "You are tearing this family apart," she said calmly, pouring herself tea. "Do you know how many investors have asked questions since you started this madness? Do you know how many board members have lost confidence?" Darlington didn't respond. He simply stared out the window, the rain making streaks down the glass as if the sky itself were weeping for him. His father joined the conversation, voice firm and disappointed. "This girl is gone. She has shamed you. And now you're shaming us by chasing a ghost. When will you stop this nonsense?" Darlington finally turned. His face was pale, but his eyes were resolute. "She didn't shame me. I shamed her. And all of you stood by while it happened." His mother narrowed her eyes. "Do not raise your voice in my house, Darlington. This is not about love. It's about structure. Do you want to be the man who loses an empire for a woman who won't even pick your calls?" He laughed, a bitter, hollow sound. "She won't pick my calls because I didn't defend her loud enough. Because I let you all treat her like a pest when she was the only person in my life who ever treated me like a human being, not a trophy." His father stood now, slamming his hand on the table. "Enough. You're marrying Cassandra. You've signed agreements with the Aga family. You don't get to destroy this empire because of a maid." The word echoed in the room like a curse. Maid. That was how they would always see her, and that was why Darlington could no longer stay. Later that night, after the confrontation, he packed a small suitcase, removed his company access badges, and drove out of the mansion without looking back. He didn't have a destination, only an intention. He couldn't sleep in that house anymore, not when every corner reminded him of failure. Not when every face reminded him of betrayal. The wedding was still technically on, but Darlington hadn't spoken to Cassandra in days. He didn't want to. In fact, the more he imagined her smug expression, the more his stomach churned. He knew Cassandra had engineered a Maka's downfall. He knew it with every fiber of his being. But what hurt the most wasn't just Cassandra's cruelty. It was that his silence had given her permission. The empire his parents built was now a prison, and all he wanted was to find the woman who once danced barefoot in his kitchen, before money, power, and pride destroyed everything. Cassandra's fury, when she heard of Darlington's disappearance, was volcanic. She threw her phone across the room, shattering it against the wall, then screamed into her silk pillow until her voice cracked. Her mother rushed in, confused and alarmed. "He's gone," Cassandra wailed, pacing the room like a lioness in a cage. "He left the mansion, canceled his schedules, and no one knows where he went." Lady Monica tried to console her, but it was too late. Cassandra's image of herself, her wedding, her control, was unraveling. The Aga family had already sent out wedding invitations to international dignitaries. Embarrassment was now breathing down their necks. "If he calls off this wedding, our shares in Obi Group are finished," her father warned over the phone later that night. "Do whatever it takes to fix this. I don't care what it costs." But Cassandra knew something had shifted in Darlington. He was no longer afraid of her, and that made him dangerous. Within 48 hours, news broke. The wedding of the year has been postponed indefinitely due to personal reasons. Social media erupted with speculation. Some blamed Darlington for being emotionally unstable. Others said Cassandra had cheated. The truth was messier than any blog could guess. Darlington had rented a small apartment in Surrey under a different name. There he spent his nights reviewing locations Amaka might be hiding, old church groups, food banks, orphanages. He kept tabs on any small events involving women empowerment, hoping to see her name pop up. But it was like chasing mist. Every clue led to another dead end. The more he searched, the more he realized that Amaka didn't just disappear. She erased herself. And maybe, just maybe, she had done it to heal. Yet he couldn't let go. Not now. Not after everything. The Obi family tried damage control. They paid PR firms to shift the narrative, made anonymous donations in Cassandra's name, and even offered Darlington incentives to reconsider. But none of it mattered. Cassandra visited him once at his temporary residence, dressed in her most seductive attire, voice softened with desperation. "We can still fix this," she whispered. "Just come back. We'll start over." Darlington looked at her the way someone looks at a stranger who once had power but lost it. "You framed her. You humiliated her. And you think I'll marry you after that?" Cassandra's eyes widened, but he wasn't finished. "You love the idea of being loved. But I actually loved someone, and you took her away from me." She didn't slap him. She didn't scream. She simply turned and left, her heels echoing in the corridor like the final beats of a funeral march. The union was broken. The facade had cracked. And all that was left was a man, a memory, and a promise to find what he had lost. Darlington returned to the Obi mansion briefly one night to collect a few more belongings. He walked through the familiar hallways like a stranger visiting a museum. Everything looked the same, yet nothing felt right. The grand staircase that once echoed with formality now felt like a tomb of silence. As he passed by Amaka's old quarters, he stopped. The door was still locked. He pulled out the spare key, unlocked it slowly, and stepped inside. The scent of lavender had faded, replaced by dust and the scent of old wood. Her bed was neatly made, just as she'd left it. On the small table was the Bible he'd already taken once and returned out of guilt. But something new caught his eye, a folded note under the pillow. With trembling fingers, he picked it up and opened it. "I danced because it was the only time I felt free. I smiled because it was the only way to hide the ache. And I left because I knew if I stayed, I would lose not just your heart, but mine too. I don't hate you, Darlington. I just can't survive your world." The handwriting was small and neat, but every word felt like a blade carving into his chest. He sank onto the edge of the bed, holding the note to his chest, and wept like a child. Not the kind of tears that came from regret, but the kind that came from the realization that some losses are not accidental. They're earned. He had loved her, truly, but he had not protected her when it mattered. He had not chosen her loudly enough. And now the echoes of what could have been haunted him more than any punishment his family could impose. He stood up after an hour, folded the note carefully, and placed it in his wallet. As he stepped out of the room, he locked the door behind him, not to preserve it as it was, but to honor what it had meant. That room wasn't just Amaka's. It was the only place in the house that had ever felt like home. Outside, the sky was cloudless, yet Darlington felt drenched in sorrow. As he entered his car, he made a vow to himself. "I will not rest until I find her, even if it takes years, even if I lose everything else in the process. Because some women don't just pass through your life. They change your soul." And Amaka had danced her way into his heart and disappeared before he had the courage to hold her close. 3 months passed. The world around Darlington continued spinning. Board meetings resumed, contracts were signed, headlines changed. But inside, he remained frozen in the moment Amaka walked away. He had become a ghost of his former self. His hair was longer, his beard grown in defiance of the polished billionaire image he once maintained. His family tried to pretend everything was fine. Cassandra traveled to Dubai under the guise of healing, but her pride still simmered beneath the surface. The media had moved on from the postponed wedding, and whispers of Darlington's spiritual retreat became the preferred excuse. But he was not in a retreat, he was in pursuit. A pursuit that had taken him to rural churches, roadside eateries, charity homes, and more. Each clue led to a dead end. Until one morning, while at a local eatery in Abeokuta, a boy selling sachet water recognized Amaka's photo. "She danced like this," he said, twisting his waist and clapping. We called her Auntie Joy. Hope surged through Darlington like lightning. The boy led him to a women's empowerment center nearby, a small initiative that trained poor women in catering and crafts. Darlington's heart pounded as he walked through the open courtyard. And there, surrounded by 5 other women stirring large pots, was Amaka. She had her back to him, apron stained with palm oil, her laughter light and unburdened. For a moment he froze. He didn't want to disturb that joy. She looked free, alive, untethered to the pain he still carried. But she turned, and their eyes met. Time halted. A metal spoon clattered to the ground. Amaka took a small step back, confusion twisting into fear, then sorrow, then guarded indifference. Darlington walked forward slowly, cautiously, as if approaching a wild bird that might fly away. "You found me," she whispered breathlessly. "I never stopped looking," he replied. They sat under the mango tree behind the building, away from the stares of curious eyes. She listened as he poured out his heart, everything he had lost, everything he had risked, everything he still felt. But Amaka didn't smile. Her eyes were distant. "Darlington," she said softly, "you're still a prisoner. Even if you walk out of your mansion, your chains are emotional. You will always have people to please. I can't be your escape." He shook his head, tears welling. "No, I want to be different. For you. Because of you." Amaka reached into her bag and handed him a photo, a little girl, about 3 years old, with her eyes and his jawline. "This is Zara. She was born 7 months ago." Darlington's world tilted. "She's mine," he gasped. Amaka nodded. "But you don't get to claim her unless you're ready to give up everything else. I won't let my daughter grow up as a secret." The great reveal wasn't just a child. It was the price of love, now written in blood and legacy. Darlington drove back to Lagos in complete silence, the photo of Zara resting on the dashboard like a holy relic. The revelation of fatherhood had shaken him to his core. Everything else, business, scandal, Cassandra, faded into irrelevance. There was a child now, a living, breathing piece of him, hidden from the world because of his silence and fear. As soon as he arrived at the estate, he called a family meeting. His parents, visibly alarmed by his tone, gathered in the sitting room. "I'm calling off the wedding," he said flatly. His mother gasped. "Darlington, we've moved past this. You can't continue embarrassing this family." But he was unmoved. "There's more," he added. "I have a daughter. Her name is Zara. She's mine, and I intend to raise her." His father stood abruptly. "With a maid? Are you insane?" Darlington's voice rose like a storm. "With a woman who chose dignity over gold. A woman who gave birth alone while I sat in this mansion pretending to be a man." His words were daggers to their pride. But he no longer cared. He was done being their obedient puppet. His mother cried, his father yelled, but Darlington was resolved. That evening, he announced his resignation from several boards and relinquished his controlling stake in 2 subsidiaries. Cassandra showed up 2 days later, escorted by her brother. Her eyes were filled with venom, but her voice was ice. "You ruined everything," she hissed. "You chose her over me." Darlington nodded. "I chose truth over performance." Cassandra scoffed and then played her last card. "You may have your daughter, but you'll never have peace. You think walking away is strength? You'll be blacklisted, humiliated, reduced." He stepped forward. "If losing everything is the price to be a real father and a real man, then so be it." Cassandra's face crumbled, not because she had lost him, but because he had finally found himself. The days that followed were brutal. News broke about his resignation. Investors panicked. The Obi brand wobbled. Rumors circulated about a secret child and a runaway engagement. Cassandra's family withdrew their investments as promised. Darlington's accounts were frozen pending audits. The media dragged his name through the mud. Headlines screamed betrayal, fall from grace, irresponsibility. But Darlington remained silent. He moved out of the estate entirely and relocated to a modest house on the outskirts of town. He began visiting Abeokuta weekly, sometimes twice, to bond with Zara. At first, Amaka kept her distance, but slowly walls began to crack. Not because he brought gifts, but because he came with consistency, humility, and presence. It wasn't easy. Her wounds were deep. But seeing him on the floor, playing peekaboo with their daughter, softened something in her. She didn't forgive him immediately, but she allowed him in. And sometimes, that's all healing needs: permission. One quiet afternoon, Amaka was cleaning out Zara's clothing drawers when she found a letter tucked beneath the baby blankets. It wasn't hers. The handwriting was Darlington's. Curiosity mixed with caution as she unfolded it. If you're reading this, it means I've failed in ways I can't explain. I left you in a world where my name gave you no protection, and my love gave you no shelter. I chose silence when you needed a voice. I chose peace when I should have chosen war. And I chose comfort over courage. But I have learned. You taught me. In your absence, I found the version of myself I had buried beneath contracts, cars, and cameras. Thank you for making me see the truth, even if I saw it too late. I don't know if I will ever be enough for you again. But for Zara, I will become the man she deserves, even if I am never allowed back into your heart. Tears dripped from Amaka's chin onto the paper. She folded it gently, placed it inside her drawer, and sat down beside her daughter. Zara looked up and smiled, a single dimple forming on her right cheek. Amaka touched her face and whispered, "Your father is trying. That matters." But she knew the journey was far from over. Love doesn't heal overnight. Trust doesn't reappear like a switch. And forgiveness is not a reward. It is a process. She would not rush. She would not fall simply because he was present. But she would observe. And maybe one day rebuild. Darlington arrived an hour later, unaware the letter had been found. But Amaka's smile was softer that evening, her eyes less guarded. And when Zara reached for him and said "Dada" for the first time, the man who once ruled the world felt like the richest man alive. But outside their small circle of healing, darkness was brewing. Cassandra hadn't moved on. In fact, she had quietly aligned with a vengeful new player, a competitor to OB Holdings, ready to use the scandal for a hostile takeover. Cassandra had nothing left to lose. And she would not rest until Darlington had nothing left to love. Not even the woman who danced and cost him everything. Darlington had finally found a rhythm again, but it was a fragile one. Every visit to Abeokuta was a thread weaving the bond between him and his daughter. He would spend hours feeding her, reading to her, sometimes just holding her in silence, while Amaka watched from across the room. Always distant, always guarded. She had softened, yes, but she had not surrendered. And Darlington understood. He didn't push. He simply showed up, again and again. Each day he lived without the weight of his father's boardroom or Cassandra's expectations, felt like a breath he had never truly taken before. He had traded influence for intimacy, public power for personal presence. But that came at a cost. His finances began to shrink. Lawsuits were emerging, old contracts being challenged, clauses being weaponized by Cassandra's father to weaken OB Holdings from the inside. And in the shadows, a new alliance was forming, one that would attack everything Darlington had left. Cassandra wasn't done. She had forged a silent partnership with a Banjo Capital, one of OB Holdings' fiercest competitors. Using leaked documents and private correspondences she had stored during her engagement, she fueled their legal and PR attacks. Her plan wasn't to win him back. It was to ensure that no woman would ever look at Darlington with admiration again. "If I can't have him," she told the Banjo CEO, "he'll have nothing left to offer anyone else." Her connections were deep. Court orders began freezing more of Darlington's assets. Contracts vanished. One of his closest friends turned on him after being offered a high-ranking position by the opposition. In Lagos, Darlington became a target for ridicule. Once the Golden Bachelor, now a cautionary tale. This is what happens when you chase maids instead of marrying your class. The headlines were cruel, but Darlington didn't flinch. He kept showing up for Amaka and Zara, carrying groceries with borrowed money, laughing despite the weight on his back. One night, he received a letter from his former lawyer, a final demand notice, for the estate he had inherited from his mother. Cassandra's family had filed a joint claim, citing breach of engagement terms that nullified part of the inheritance clause. If he didn't settle in court, the property would be sold to recover relational damages. That was the last straw. Darlington sat in his small, sparsely furnished room and broke. Not from regret, but from exhaustion. He had given up everything, and he was still being hunted. He wrote a long message to Amaka, explaining everything. But before sending it, he paused. What if telling her made things worse? What if this chaos touched Zara? So, he deleted the message. The next morning, he kissed his daughter goodbye as she napped, nodded gently at Amaka, and whispered, "I'll come back. I promise." She smiled a small, unsure smile, and watched him walk away. Neither of them knew that promise was about to be tested in a way neither of them imagined. 3 weeks passed. No one heard from Darlington. No texts. No calls. Amaka waited patiently for the first few days, even dialing his number once. But it rang out. Then came the whispers. A hostile takeover of Obi Holdings had been finalized. Cassandra had gone public with damaging claims, alleging Darlington abandoned his responsibilities and tried to manipulate the firm through emotional blackmail. She even paraded falsified documents, claiming Amaka had tried to extort the family. Amaka was devastated, not for herself, but for what Zara would one day read about her father. Still, she believed he would return. She had seen his eyes. She had felt his change. Then came the shock. One afternoon, while walking through a local plaza in Abeokuta, she saw a billboard. It was massive. A banjo capital and Cassandra Aga present, the future of wealth. At the center of the image stood Cassandra, stunning as ever in a red gown. But beside her, to Amaka's horror, was Darlington, dressed in a navy blue suit, hand resting gently on Cassandra's waist, both of them smiling, as if nothing had happened, as if he had never left, as if she and Zara were figments of an imagination. Amaka stood frozen, mouth dry, chest collapsing. A crowd walked by, some commenting on the reunion of the year. She stumbled back to the house, heart pounding, mind spinning. The betrayal felt cosmic. Had he gone back? Had he lied all along? Or had he been forced into it to save what was left of his family's legacy? She waited a week. No calls. Nothing. Then, one morning, a brown envelope was slipped under her door. Inside it was a small flash drive, and a note in Darlington's handwriting. For your eyes only. If you don't hear from me in 1 month, know that I didn't choose this. I was chosen as a sacrifice. Her hands shook as she inserted the flash drive into her neighbor's old laptop. A video loaded. It was Darlington, recorded in a dimly lit room, voice low and heavy. They said if I don't return to Cassandra, they'll destroy you and take Zara. I don't have enough power left to fight them head on. I need time. I need silence. Please protect our daughter and pray for me. The screen faded. Amaka clutched her chest, tears falling as Zara giggled in the background, oblivious. The billboard had lied. The world had lied. Darlington was now a prisoner in a suit. And she was alone again. But not broken. Not this time. To be continued. Thank you for watching this video. What did you learn from this story? Drop it in the comments. Please make sure you like, comment, and subscribe to my YouTube channel TOCHI Stories for more.